Now, as we've discussed, I am never going to support a public BDSM scene, but the impression I have from people who have issues with this is that that's not what's happening. Nobody's practicing a BDSM scene. It's literally just a twink in a jock strap and a leather harness with a hanky in his pocket. Like, that's it. Or not his pocket, hanging out of his jock strap, you know? Hey guys, it's Kat and it's time for another episode of True Tea. Welcome back to another episode of True Tea. I appreciate those of you guys who have been tuning in every single week to our new podcast. That's right, True Tea is now a podcast, and my new plan for True Tea as a show is to have it be a mostly podcast show with every first Tuesday of the month being a True Tea video episode. Thank you so much for those of you guys who have been supporting the new format. You guys know that I've recently been re-examining a lot of the things that I'm doing, a lot of things that I'm creating, and I just really love the idea of the podcast, and I know that a lot of people like the video versions as well. So what I've decided I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, have video versions every month at the beginning of the month. And then there's going to be several subsequent episodes that are podcast only. Also, something that's brand new is we're going to be having a call-in show coupled with every True Tea episode. Now, I'm changing my schedule a bit. I've been doing a Tuesday episode coupled with a Friday call-in show. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to have a Tuesday episode, and then next Tuesday will be the call-in show. So these episodes will be a little bit more spaced out. If you guys have been following the podcast, you know that the call-in show is 3 podcast episodes, and I just decided that maybe it would be better for me to space it out a bit more. So that's what we're going to be doing, and I'm really excited for the call-in show this week because this topic is very, very interesting and has a lot of different sides, and I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say about kink in Pride. Now, I am sitting in my apartment and it's 10 o'clock at night, and girl, it is incredibly too warm right now. So I'm having myself a little drinky drink, non-alcoholic. Funny story, I actually went to my first post-pandemic party. And because I've been recovering from surgery and taking a bunch of pain pills, I have not been able to drink alcohol. And I went to my first party totally sober. And honestly, it was a really, really great time. So that might stick. We're doing a lot of re-examining of our habits, and I'm excited to sort of see how the new version of me interacts in a, post-pandemic world, even though we're still working towards that. Anyway, let me take a big sip of this and let's get right into this conversation. So, kink at Pride. You guys wanted me to talk about this. I got a lot of requests for this conversation. Now, couple of things to say about this before we get into it. You guys know that I can't do a True Tea episode without a disclaimer. So first and foremost, I think that we need to start by saying, and I feel like we say this in every single episode, and I say it so frequently that it low-key feels a little homophobic, but I'm gonna say it. Despite the fact that I am a transgender woman, I'm also very, very heterosexual. And for that reason, I've often had very complicated feelings around going to Pride. I've only been to gay Pride twice in my life, and I'll get into some of the experiences I've had at Pride. But what I concluded after going to Pride a few times is that it just really wasn't for me. So I'm starting this conversation out by acknowledging that I am not somebody who actively goes to Pride. To be completely honest with you guys, I forget that it's Pride Month every single year because I don't really think of it in that way. You guys remind me that it's Pride Month, or maybe sometimes I have speaking engagements for Pride Month during June. So I guess for me, it's just not exactly on, my radar in the same way as people where this month is really, really important to them. And I think that a lot of that's because of my straightness. So I just want to start out by saying that I'm actually really excited to have the call-in show because I really want to hear from people who actively go to Pride. But obviously, as a transgender woman who is active in the BDSM community, I've got a lot of opinions about this. So let's get into some of them. So you guys know that I'm of 2 minds on a lot of things. And what I learned actually just reading my comments is that a lot of people were sharing the video that I did about BDSM in the grocery store in the context of this conversation. Now let's quickly summarize my thoughts in that video. So that video was about a dominatrix who was paid to lead a man who was in a puppy hood and a leash through the store, and they were doing an active BDSM scene in public, right? And my opinion around that was that it wasn't what he was wearing. It wasn't his particular kink. It wasn't that at all. It was the fact that he was actively participating in a BDSM scene in public, specifically a BDSM humiliation scene, which is including the public. It kind of requires the public in order for this, the kink to actually be realized. For me, because he was doing that, because that's what was going on, that was a negation of consent. And for me, BDSM will always be about consent. I'm drawn to BDSM because it's taught me better consent. It's taught me that I can say no. That's what's really, really important to me about BDSM. There were a lot of really annoying conversations around this particular issue because a lot of people wanted to make this argument that people who had a problem with it were bigots who just didn't want to accept people being kinky. That wasn't it for me. And I don't personally believe that the BDSM community wants to normalize this. Most of my friends, most of the people within the community that I know were strongly against it. And most of the people that I saw defending this were people who frankly just thought that it was kind of hot. That was the vague idea that I got. It was a lot of people sharing memes and being like, "Ooh, I wish that were me." Not understanding that for us in the BDSM community, this idea that we are being pushy, that we are forceful, that we are trying to get people to accept our kinks regardless of how uncomfortable it makes them, it's not helpful to us. It's definitely not helpful to us. So that's how I felt about that. And of course, people are sharing that in the context of kink at Pride. But my problem with that is that I don't believe that's generally what's happening at Pride, right? Now, some of you guys know that every year, before the pandemic, I would go to Folsom Street Fair. Folsom Street Fair is actually the closest that I get to going to a gay pride. It is, for those of you guys who don't know, a festival that happens in San Francisco. They cut off certain streets, they block it all off, and you are allowed to go to this space and basically be as kinky as you want. I will not tell you about all the things that I've seen there, but girl, I've seen a lot of things. And to be completely honest with you, I love Folsom Street Fair for that reason. There is sometimes the issue of, people just kind of looky-looing and being, gawking at the freaks or whatever. But it is a really fun space of just freedom and expression. And it is one of the rare environments where it is very appropriate for you to do your humiliation scene in public. Now, part of the thing with Folsom Street Fair is that you have to be 18 in order to get in. You can't just walk in to a Folsom Street Fair. If you're underage, you can't actually access this space. And obviously that's for a reason. And so for me, I really appreciate Folsom Street Fair for creating a situation where that can happen, where not only that can happen, but education can happen, resources can happen, community building can happen. And one of the things you see very commonly at Folsom Street Fair is the leather community. Now, here's where this kind of intersects with the conversation around kink at Pride. Now, there was a time in the gay community specifically, and also in various other communities, where sex was scary, right? Sex was very, very scary. During the AIDS crisis, there were a lot of people trying to figure out ways to express themselves in a sexy way that in some situations didn't involve exactly having sex. And so what you had a lot of times, especially in the 70s and 80s and 90s, was this resurgence of this culture around leather. And leather was really, really, really important for a lot of gay folks, especially for finding community, finding family. It was one of the rare situations where somebody could kind of come and participate in an activity and find like-minded individuals who know where they're coming from. Now, in my understanding, when people are doing kink at Pride, usually that's kind of what you end up seeing. People doing leather stuff, or maybe just, twinks wearing, harnesses, okay? When I went to Gay Pride, I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of very scantily clad men just walking around in harnesses. And in my opinion, that, is fairly harmless, right? I don't think that that is actually inherently kinky. And for me, again, my problem with the guy in the grocery store was not that he was wearing a puppy hood. Well, even though people would see that as weird still, it was not that he was wearing a leash. It was that they were actively doing a BDSM scene in public without consent, right? Now, the way in which obviously Gay Pride is a bit different than Folsom Street Fair is that at least at LA Pride, you don't have to be over 18 to go. And I know that a lot of people's discomfort with kink at Pride is kind of related to that. Now, I've told this story before, but one of the things that turned me off personally from going to Pride was that I went to Pride with my boyfriend at the time, and we were just on the street watching the parade go by, which frankly was very underwhelming. But we saw the parade, and it was a cute little whatever. But I saw a bunch of gay porn playing on the streets not just from where I was standing. I didn't have to go into this place. I didn't have to get ID'd to go into this place. It was literally just blasting on the screens for everybody to see. Now, in that moment, of course, part of me thought, well, okay, I'm straight, like maybe this is something that I'm being offended by that I shouldn't be offended by, but I couldn't help but think about the fact that this was not a space that was cornered off for people who were 18 and older only. This was very much a space where kids could come and potentially see gay porn playing right in, the bars along Santa Monica. And I personally just felt that that was inappropriate. And I don't like even getting close to or inching towards this idea that we, should just sort of tell people who bring their kids to Pride to get over seeing stuff like that. I think it's very normal to want to protect children from that sort of thing. Yes, there's further conversations to be had about sex positivity and raising your kids. But at the end of the day, when it comes to showing children porn, I'm always going to be against it. Hot take. Now, that all being said, I think people often forget that Pride started as a riot, right? And what I've just observed over the years is this sort of corporatization of Pride. And of course, with the corporatization of Pride, there comes a sanitation of it, right? Pride for years was this very radical thing, right? Where people were coming and being seen and saying, fuck normativity, fuck assimilation, fuck sort of falling in line, because we don't fall in line. We will never fall in line. And that's why we are proud. That's why we have pride, right? And now it's kind of become sanitized. And so now we do have people bringing their children to Pride. It is now kind of a family getaway for some people. And frankly, in my personal opinion, I love that. I love the fact that people can bring their kids. And I actually think it's really important for parents to perform support of the LGBT community so that their children understand that if that ends up being them, that they will be supported, right? And so I love that, right? But it kind of comes in tandem with the sanitation of Pride, right? The corporatization of Pride. Now, when I went to Pride, I do remember that there was sort of like this section that got, that was cut off to where you could kind of go and, have access to music stages and things like that. But there were still a lot of things that I saw that other people could say were inappropriate. Again, for me, I sit there and I question, is it my right to be offended by this as a straight person? right? Because personally, part of the reason why I often feel like I don't really belong in queer spaces is, well, first of all, I don't need them. I'm not somebody who IDs as queer or feels like that's important to me. But I just often get this impression that, this is a space that will frustrate and annoy me because it's not pandering to me. And so I would rather remove myself than sort of like have a conversation about how they should change things. That's just personally my own personal opinion, right? But there are clearly people who have issues with this, who are queer, are gay, etc., whatever your identification may be, who have issues with this, right? But I don't think that a lot of people who feel that way understand just how important and impactful the BDSM community is and has been for giving a lot of LGBTQIA+ people a sense of community, right? And in my personal opinion, those people belong at Pride. Leather people belong at Pride. People who have fostered communities and built spaces for people to feel validated and safe and sexually liberated, especially in a society that actively discourages and shames them for it. Those people definitely belong at Pride. Now, as we've discussed, I am never going to support a public BDSM scene, but the impression I have from people who have issues with this is that that's not what's happening. Nobody's practicing a BDSM scene. It's literally just a twink in a jock strap and a leather harness with a hanky in his pocket. Like, that's it, or not his pocket, hanging out of his jock strap. That's kind of it, honestly. That's what it seems like. To me, sometimes when I read through these arguments, it comes off like somebody's just wanting to shame somebody for being sexy and open about it. Now, of course, we could still argue that, a naked gay man is, inappropriate for the kids, think about the children or whatever. But of course, that's the argument that's been used against the LGBT community forever, Now, again, I don't go to Pride, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But I think that some people might have less of an issue, right, with this kink at Pride discussion if there was sort of like a section where like, hey, in order to come here, you gotta be 18 and over, and you can be as naked and horny as you want. We totally love and support that here. And then we've got the, corporate sanitized Pride over here, where you can bring your kids and drag queens can, dance around and read books and things like that. You know what I mean? I think that maybe that would work better, because the impression I have is that that's not a thing that happens at a lot of Prides. But just this idea of people being offended by people who are kinky, especially within the gay community, girl, pardon me. I mean, listen, I'm not gonna tell you that you need to just get over yourself, but sis, get over it. You know what I mean? Like low key get over it, because again, for me, it comes off a little like slut shamey, a little bit like you just don't want to see sexy men. And look, it's not my thing either. I mean, I like a naked man. I mean, probably they're all gay, so they're probably not looking at me, but but like, it's not my personal thing. It's not fun for me, honestly. But it's fun for a lot of gay folks. And why can't they have those spaces? I don't understand what the problem really is, right? So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I kind of feel like if you want to be uncomfortable with people who are kinky at Pride, I guess that's your right. But I think that it does a really big disservice to erase the history, especially the history as it is connected to the HIV and AIDS crisis, of just how important those spaces were for gay folk, for queer folk in general. So that's my true tea. Needed that sip because sis, it is so hot in here. And I'm really excited to get yours. So please feel free to call in next Tuesday. I don't know what time. We're still figuring it out. This is all a process of, figuring out what I can and can't do. I really, really love hearing your feedback and what you guys feel about the show and things like that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. I'm really excited to have the call-in show. I'm sure I said some things in this video that are probably inaccurate. Feel free to come for me in the comment section. Feel free to call in on Tuesday. Anyway, on that note, if you have watched this entire video, I want you to put this emoji in the comment section below. The emoji is what all the cool kids do. All the kinkiest, sexiest kids who, go to Pride, they put that in the comment section. I'm just saying. And you can do what you need to do. Frankly, I don't care. I'm fine with that. I'll do bad by myself, personally. I put the emoji in every time. But, I'm just saying that, we're having this really intense lesbian pool party, and like, if you want to come, you're invited. But like, if you don't put the emoji, we can't let you in. That's all. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys next time. Right now, you're looking at 2 videos you can watch if you'd like to continue to sip true tea right here on the channel. And in the corner, there are several ways you can send me a tip if that's something that you're interested in doing. Don't forget to follow the podcast and download it on all podcast platforms. And I will see you guys next Tuesday. Bye.